Hello. Today we're going to be talking about Ethan's Typhlosion, a deck that can do a lot of damage very quickly, a deck that is good under item lock. It is one prizer based, so you are generally very good into your multi-prize matchups, and you should be able to adjust for a lot of awkward situations with the built-in engine of Ethan's Adventure. That being said, let's get started. So we're going to be talking about Pure Typhlosion today. It's a hybrid one prizer that focuses on a few different things. I want to talk about the Pokemon line being very simplistic in this list, how the trainer line kind of compensates for that, my current list, some thoughts, and I can touch on matchups really quickly as well as we progress. So to get right into it, because I don't want to really waste too much time with this, the Pokemon line is very simple. You can see the entire thing on screen now. It is 4 Cyndaquil, 4 Quilava, 3 Typhlosion. Your main attackers, that should be rather self-explanatory. However, there's a few support Pokemon to go around it, but not as many as most lists normally run. I'll touch on that in just a minute. But to talk about what is in here, we have 2 Victini to do damage fixing. Typhlosion, for the unfamiliar, does 40 damage plus 60 for each of your Ethan's Adventure in your discard pile. And the Quilava has an ability that searches your deck for Ethan's Adventure once per turn. And so if you can discard all your Ethan's Adventure, you're hitting 280. With Victini, that goes up to 290 and 300. And then with Brave Bangle, you're suddenly reaching 330 damage, enough to knock out the vast majority of tanky Pokemon, like for example Mega Lopunny and Mega Starmie. There is also one copy of Ethan's Pichu. It is a weird card, it is an abnormal card. So why is Ethan's Pichu in this deck? Well, it's because if you can find an Ethan's Adventure while under item lock, no matter what Pokemon you have in active, they all have a 1 energy retreat. You can Ethan's Adventure for Fire Energy plus Pichu, attach to active, discard retreat, swing for 30, that knocks out Budu, Smoochum, and a few other vital targets. It also sets up a little bit of chip damage so that you don't need Brave Bangle into beefier Pokemon. And then you get a little bit of draw to help ease out your draw curve a little bit more. So it gives you a very consistent option to keep your momentum flowing. In addition to that, there is also 1 Shaymin and 1 Fez in the deck. 2 staples in the format as of right now. Spread is very strong and you have a very fragile line of Pokemon, so trying to deny that as much as possible is essential. Some could say that you can swap it out for a Psyduck instead. I don't like that idea, personally, because Spread completely eviscerates you. Duskulls, at least you're being given prizes to kind of make things work. But it is viewer discretion. And then Fez compensates for the lack of other Pokemon draw. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about next. Why is there no Pokemon draw in here? So, looking at the primary ways that people would draw with their Pokemon in format right now, you have Dracloak, which, honestly, into Pult, you're just going to be losing your Dracloaks way too reliably, and Battle Cage, even though we run 1 copy, isn't really going to be good denial overall for it. And so I don't want to make that risk and make that jump of putting a bunch of 90 HP liabilities to make a bad matchup worse. And touching on it a bit early, that matchup is really bad. And Sword Work. Your opponent is going to be able to knock it out for many prizes really fast up front. It's also a 2 energy retreat, which means that it is pretty easy for your opponent to trap. And you also don't want to overthin your resources too aggressively, because there is a lot of cards that you need at all points in the game, and so overly focusing on the discard engine is a bit much. For Dunsparces, gonna be honest, Watchtower is just very scary, and then mid-games are a little bit wonky if you only have 1 Quilava, because you're going to be filling your hand with a lot of cards that don't flow. And also Dunsparces are like $3, $4 a piece, and you don't want to spend $4 per piece on a Dunsparce. Don't bother with it. You don't need it. There's other options that they're not going to be just as good, but they're going to be pretty adequately good. Last little note to make is Alakazam. It is technically another option. You're going to have a big hand, so you might as well think about it. But a lot of red card is just kind of scary, to be honest with you. And even though you run a lot of Pokemon Search, trying to also run a mixed energy line at that point, it feels like you're asking to do too much with too little space, and so that's why I haven't considered Alakazam here. So how are we going to get the deck to flow if we're only running that simplistic a Pokemon line? Well, for discard outlets, we're going to talk about that first because Ethan's Adventures are going to need to be discarded for you to hit your max damage ranges. For Ultra Ball, good search, staple card, self-explanatory. Next, Secret Box. It is reliable search, it finds your outlets, and over other aspects, it makes bad early games extremely efficient. And if you're able to find your Secret Box, you're able to guarantee at least 2 Ethan's Adventure to discard. Oh my goodness, I'm stumbling over words. But another thing to mention is that we run Prism Tower. 2 copies in this list. Thinning is winning overall. The less bad early game stuff you have in your deck in the late game, the more likely your top decks are going to be good off of red card. Plus, if your opponent is red carding you, having Prism Tower in play gives you a little bit more draw other than on-field draw engine, and Stadium Denial will always just be good in general. In addition to that, with Secret Box, you can now search for a Pokemon search, an Ethan's Adventure, and Prism Tower. The Pokemon search for Quilava ability, Ethan's Adventure, Prism Tower double Ethan's Adventure, and suddenly you've just increased your Ethan's Adventure count by 2. So you have very consistent routing with your Prism Tower overall. So expanding the reach a little bit here, what card manipulation do we run? We run 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Poké Pad 3 Poffin, just guaranteeing your route to Quilava because finding your first Ethan's Adventure gets your field really wide really quick. And even beyond that, being able to spread your field wide without Ethan's Adventure means you can Lillie more aggressively. There's also 3 Stretcher, 1 Sacred Ash, because you do want to have 5 Typhlosion in a game, or 4 Typhlosion in a game, and that means you need a lot of recovery to consistently chain them. Even if you need 3 Shaymin or a couple of extra Victinis, having a lot of recovery will help with that and keeping your Typhlosion in play. Last couple of notes, 3 Candy, Typhlosion early and mid-game tempo, very efficient, keeping your Quilavas in play as Quilavas is very beneficial to chaining your mid-game. 1 Scrapper because Cape is annoying, 1 Ticket because prizes are bad, you can fix it. Pretty simplistic on the whole when it comes to how the deck list works and how the breakdown of the deck list works. So let's talk supporter counts just really quick before I get into that full list. For Ethan's Adventure, because again, the Pichu combo only gets funny. It's not a bad Lillie replacement, but like you need 4 to hit your max damage. Of course you run 4. 4 Lilies, best draw, use it. Self-explanatory. 2 Boss, targeted removal is good. Use it. 1 Kieran for damage amp and trap avoidance. You don't run a lot of pivoting, so Kieran is a good way to go about it, and it also means that you can use the damage mode instead of a Brave Bangle or with a Brave Bangle to hit big one-shots on the beefier Pokemon in format. You might be thinking, why no Carmine, no other discard draw? Honestly, you just don't need all of that, but if you do want to tinker with the list and find space for it, there's a lot of space because we don't run a Pokemon-based draw engine. You can find space and use it efficiently. So, the list altogether is on the screen now. A couple of things that weren't mentioned in that previous little recap. The list fluctuates from 4 to 3 Brave Bangle for myself on a personal note, just because I find that you really want Brave Bangle to hit your max damage ranges, but you also don't mind increasing your count of fire energy slightly, because that tends to be somewhere where you run really short on resources at the end of the game. There's also 1 copy of Battle Cage, because it stops quite a few very beneficial effects. Probably the most notable thing is it stops Dusknoir to the bench, and it stops Frostlass incrementing onto your Quilavas, but it also stops Dragapult damage if you are in a pinch, and it can make those mid-games a little bit easier. There's also no copies of Red Card in the list because it is very much one of those deck lists where, on a personal note, I just wanted it to do the same things that it does as consistently as possible, and so that's where I'm at with it as of right now. If I was to make some cuts to it, I would be cutting 1 Brave Bangle, 1 Tool Scrapper, and potentially 1 of your Pokemon search options in order to increase your fire energy count by 1. Potentially think about adding 2 more draw supporters, and then just seeing how it flows from there. Otherwise, just tinkering with counts a little bit more or seeing if you can add in Dunsparces if you already own them would be a nice increase to your consistency overall. Just one note to be had, make sure all of your basics have that 1 energy retreat cost, so you have that option to route into Pichu turn 1 with Ethans if that is required of your board state, or if you are under Badoo item lock. Last but not least, I want to touch on matchups. There's quite a few very viable decks right now, and you actually do have a pretty good matchup spread into a few of them. So this is all taken from the most recent Limitless page from pre-Chaos Rising format, and I'm just going to go through some of the deck lists that are up here. When it comes to Pult variants, you have a lot of difficulty, but you do actually tend to get one-shots. And so if you're able to keep their field thin and you're able to punish their Badoos early, they can't pop things like Dusknoirs very efficiently, and you're generally able to race them pretty adequately. The one condition is that you need to make sure that you prep Plural Typhlosion without sacrificing your Quilavas, because your Quilavas are needed for mid-game to guarantee your ramp into your 4 Ethan's adventures. Raging Bolt, you kind of just walk over them because you just do so much ludicrous damage, so that is actually a very favored matchup for you. Same thing with the Teal Mask Meganium decks, especially when you have the Shaymin and they're not able to use things like Arboliva. It makes a very easy matchup route for you to navigate. Lucario tends to have difficulty getting early game one-shots on Typhlosions if you get your candy, and you tend to get a lot of good one-shot value, so it does tend to be pretty reasonable. The one thing is Soul Rocks can make your early game 1-for-1 equal, so trying to make sure that they can't chain Soul Rocks for the entirety of early game, and trying to make sure that you can get your 4 Ethan's Adventure and discard is very beneficial overall. Lopunny, you one-shot them, end of story. Alakazam is a little bit tricky because you two both do the same thing and our current list doesn't run any disruption. However, you normally with Pichu are able to do dramatic pressure to their field early, and because of Ethan's Adventure, you tend to navigate early games really efficiently. If you do want to make that matchup a bit easier, finding a slot for a Badoo would be very nice. However, not necessarily needed. It's just a one prize race, about as even a matchup as you can get. When it comes to Zoroark, you one-shot them. They can't Darm you because you have Shaymin. No one's running bombs because it's bad, so you should be fine in that regard. And then it's just racing them as a 1-prize deck against 2-prize tends to be favored for you. When it comes to when it comes to Rocket Box, they can chase you with Spidops, and that does get very awkward very quick. But as long as you're able to maintain your tempo, it is relatively winnable, especially if you hit turn 2 candy. Honchkrow is a little tough just because they can do so much damage, but if you are lucky, you might be able to get good value out of Pichu early game, and if you're able to do that, you might be able to snowball into a win pretty easily. Slotbox, 1-prize to 2-prize with Shaymin, you should be good. When it comes to the big tanky Garchomp, you don't really one-shot as easily, but you have a lot of early game pressure, and even though they can one-shot you pretty consistently, you have so much pressure that you tend to keep up. It is a very close matchup, but slightly favored to the 1-prizer. Festival Lead will just completely walk over you because they do too much damage to too many Pokemon too quickly, and it's a 1-prize race that you will lose every time. Unfortunate, but it is the way it is. One good thing to note about that matchup is that you can use Cyndaquil to one-shot Diplins. That's about where the good news ends. When it comes to Starmie, big HP, but you can one-shot it. They do good spread, but you have Shaymins. It tends to be pretty tolerable, all things considered. Just make sure that you always have one Shaymin in play, otherwise your entire field will be evaporated, and that's not fun. If they're on the Tank Starmie build, it also gets a bit tricky, but Hero's Cape you have an answer for in Tool Scrapper, so it is tolerable. Slowking is very tough because it is again a 1-prize race, but they have to rely on a bunch of 2-prizers. You can chase those out. You have Shaymin. If you prize Shaymin, it gets really tough, but it is overall a pretty fine matchup. Crustle, you outpace, and you will just win that matchup every time. Greninja, previously to Chaos Rising, was pretty favored for you because you did massive damage, you blocked their spreads, and overall you kept really good momentum. Now it's a lot closer to even, because Mega Greninja just does so much damage to all of your assets on the bench. However, not running any extra supporting Pokemon and just keeping your deck very simple does improve your matchup slightly, because it means that they have less targets for their giant water shuriken. Beedrill, grass type, stage 2, you kind of just walk over it because of weakness. And last but not least, when it comes to matchups that I feel like are relevant to talk about, is Hop's Trevenant. As some of you know, it did really well at a recent regional, and all things considered, you actually have a pretty okay matchup into it, just because you're able to keep a very steady tempo. They don't come online for a little while after the game starts, and even when they do come online, you're able to answer back to every KO with very tanky Pokemon, all things considered, for their damage ranges. It can get tricky, but if you're targeting their Snorlaxes, you can survive. Just make sure not to bench Fez into any of the one-prizer decks, and you're pretty good. So, that's all I have time for today. I just want to reintroduce myself to those of you who are new. My name's Gazapniak. I have a Modern Regionals Day 2, a Regionals Top 8 a while ago, a State Top 4 a while ago, Ace Trainer a few years. Basically, I do a lot of things, but above all, I am a rogue specialist who specializes in building really wonky deck lists, and I am looking for a team or sponsor technically, but that's okay. I'm just having fun right now. It's the off season. We're trying to have fun making new decks and trying to experiment with new things to enjoy the format to its fullest. That's my priority for now. And with that, if you want to see more, you can go and subscribe down below. While you're there, if you're on mobile, if you want to hype the video, or if you want to like it, if you're on desktop, that would be greatly appreciated. You can also catch me on a few other platforms. All links will be in the description, including the slides themselves. And with that, that is all I have time for today. I'll catch you guys all later on. Thank you very much for listening in, and I'll catch you later.